Don't mind me, I'm just rambling about my show again. So, anytime you make a villain, they should always be something that is imposing for the protagonist, because if you have a, you know, antagonist who's not threatening for the hero, it'll make the story feel like it has less stakes or no stakes, and it'll be harder to take it seriously. This is why a common criticism of the MCU is that during serious moments, in spite of a lot of the villains in that film series, being physically powerful, because the heroes are making jokes, it's a lot harder to believe they're really, scared or worried for themselves or under any kind of threat. Um, so the main villain of the show I've talked about a little bit before in this other video. I think it's called The Rivalry I Have to Get Right, where I just kind of talked about the parallels he has with the older brother. But I didn't mention that with the younger brother, I considered the secondary antagonist of the show uh, to be his archenemy, in the sense that she's someone who has, had powers for a very long time. She's kind of like in her mid 20s. She's been, training and using her abilities and whatnot. And so she's very experienced with all of the things that she can do. Whereas the little brother at the start of the show is someone who's been in a few fights, but still has hardly, been in like any real serious combat. And, for that reason, along with her being larger than he is, for the first season and some change, he really cannot defeat her in a fight at all. He has to rely on either his wits or getting some other person involved, or his older brother, the older brother's best friend, his babysitter, his grandparents. And, again, that's mostly to just kind of show that when he does eventually defeat her on his own, or is able to stand up to her by himself longer, it feels a lot more gratifying, because you've seen through her as sort of a litmus test, how far he was able to go in terms of, how has he grown with regard to the usage of his abilities, what new things he picked up, what new ways of fighting has he discovered, and getting more and more experience as someone that can, battle and whatnot. And one of the things I liked about her is that outside of being the arch enemy for the little brother, she's also sort of something of a love interest for the older brother, who kind of swears off having any type of relationships, kind of in keeping with the mantra of the superhero who doesn't want their loved ones to get hurt. Although I have another reason for it that gets shown in the first episode if I end up producing it. But it's very important to me to kind of communicate this idea that, whereas the older brother really believes in this philosophy of, people with powers have to use them for good. She uses hers to, get herself stuff, rob places, really just in any way that is beneficial for herself. And it's kind of a moral conflict of, is it right to think only of yourself with the powers that you have, or to possibly think of others who are not as gifted as you are, but, can still benefit from your involvement. And I never really have the older brother and her fight all that much, because they're kind of, I imagine they're pretty even. So it's more of a ideological dispute, whereas with the younger brother and her, it's a physical one. And I did another video on her. I think it was called "She Couldn't Have Him" or some of that effect. But in that video, I kind of mentioned that she met the grandfather of both of the boys. When she was a kid, because she's like, 4 or 5 years older than the older brother. And one of the things I've always liked about different series that have characters, like major characters of, various ages, right? Some little kids, teenagers, young adults, senior citizens, is that we as the viewer, we as the audience, or I as the writer, might be, getting into the life of this 20-year-old, 70-year-old character for the first time ever. But the fact that they've lived, again, decades before any stories took place, opens the possibility of more stories, right? Of like, hey, you've known this person for 20 years. What were the most significant things to happen during that period? Because I, kind of map out in my mind that the grandfather is someone who she's not necessarily extremely close to, but he certainly is one of the few adults that knows what she is, accepted her for what she was, even back when she was a kid and didn't really know how to control her powers all that much. And that's something that resonated with her, and is why they've still kept in contact in spite of whatever friction she may have with the grandchildren, or his grandchildren. And then my favorite aspect of her is that she serves as a secondary, again, like antagonist in the first season, but more so in being another, I guess, villainous entity for the hero. She's also a villainous entity for the main bad guy, right? Sometimes she gets in the middle of his plans. And I like that because it's so rare, and I'm not even trying to make myself sound like I'm this great, amazing writer, but it's so rare in a lot of media to see villains versus villains, right? Like to see a villain go up to another villain and go, "Hey, you have something I want, give it to me." "Oh, you're not giving it to me. All right, well, we have to throw down." You don't really get that that often in really a lot of media, right? They might have multiple antagonists, but how often do they just come blow to blows with each other? And it's through having two different main villains, or I guess the main villain and then a secondary villain, that you get to kind of see the differences where she as the secondary villain is not, I would say, a good person or a great person, but she's still not as evil as the main villain. Won't just go around killing people just for the hell of it. Has redeeming qualities, right? And in having someone who's more antagonistic, it kind of gives her a little bit more of a moral gray area to kind of like sometimes be on the side of the good guys, even if she's not technically one herself. Because there is this hope that if we, I've only written, I wrote out the first season and I'm having like different ideas for the second one. But I'd imagine if this show were to get, let's say, because if I do 3, I'm doing 4, because I don't like ending things on 3. I'm sick of trilogies. But I'd imagine if this were to get about 4 seasons, I would have her kind of like progress from, villain to anti-villain to anti-hero, and then just kind of see if it can go even further. We just kind of like peel back the layers and sort of, just see if she's able to overcome those vices, right? That selfishness, if she's able to ever actually believe in being heroic. Because I try to like demonstrate from time to time that there are things that she believes in terms of she truly, and again, I take from Magneto with this, right? Believes in this idea of people with powers, having either some supremacy or they should stick together against a society that is often fearful and resentful of them for their advantages. To where, I do show where she's concerned about other people that have abilities just because of feeling that they should have some kinship with each other. So she is someone who can put her own ambitions aside for a higher cause, and really it just becomes a question of, will she ever be able to allow those more nobler traits to override some of her worst habits. But like I said, in the confines of the first 2 seasons, I think she works as a solid archenemy for the little brother, right? He has to basically always do something besides defeating her with brute force, because she's just so much more powerful and experienced. Really shows his cunning and also, again, his growth as a fighter the more he's able to keep up with her. She's also, again, something of a love interest for the older brother, and kind of, they have that philosophical debate of, should people with powers be compelled to help out others simply because of some perception that this is the right thing to do. And I really like her dynamic with the main villain, because it just shows you there's different layers of being an antagonist. The people that are doing this because they have some personal want and would rather be left alone more often than not, or the ones that just want to, see the world burn. So I think she's a good addition.